The blood drained from my face as Mackenzie's words cut through me like a blade, her manicured nails dapping rhythmically against the tablet while she dismantled 15 years of my life with clinical precision. I'd given everything to Oakridge Millworks, but as she slid the devastating document across the gleaming conference table, I realized loyalty meant nothing in the cold calculus of corporate America. I'd grown up with sawdust in my veins. My father, a master carpenter from Boston's South Side, had taught me the value of solid wood and a firm handshake when I was barely tall enough to see over his workbench. People forget prices, Ryan, he'd tell me, calloused hands guiding mine over cherry heartwood, but they remember how you make them feel. Those lessons followed me through Northeastern, where I worked construction summers to pay tuition. I wasn't the best student, but I could talk to anyone, the foreman, the architect, the client, bridging walls with easy conversation and genuine interest in their lives. By graduation, I had a dozen job offers, but it was Charles Westfield's firm handshake at the Oakridge Millworks that sealed my future. "You remind me of myself," Charles had said, his weathered face crinkling at the corners. Smart enough to know what matters. In those early days, I'd sleep under my desk some nights, determination fueling late calls to West Coast clients. Charles noticed. Promoted me 6 times in 10 years. Marriage to Sarah came during year 3 at Oakridge. Our wedding was small, just family, and Charles himself acting as my best man. "You'll run this place someday," he whispered before the ceremony, pressing a set of antique carpentry tools into my hands. "These belonged to my father, now they're yours." The birth of Emma 2 years later changed everything. I still remember holding her tiny body against my chest in the hospital, making silent promises. I'd build something lasting for her. Sarah snapped a photo of that moment. It sat on my desk at Oakridge for the next 12 years, watching as I transformed from ambitious salesman to the company's top producer. The hours were brutal. 300 nights in hotels annually. Missed recitals. Forgotten anniversaries. But the calls always came. "Ryan, we need you in Dallas. Ryan, the Chapman account is wavering. Ryan, only you can close this." And I'd go telling myself each sacrifice was building Emma's future while watching her childhood through FaceTime calls and weekend sprints to soccer games. Brandon Holloway at Patterson Commercial once told me, "Ryan, you know my business better than I do." We were celebrating their 3rd warehouse expansion, a $2.03 million contract I'd shepherded through 11 revisions. His wife had leaned in, and he knows our kids' birthdays better than we do sometimes. We'd all laughed, but the truth stung. I knew their children's milestones while missing many of my own daughters. Sarah and I had separated briefly during year 10. "You're married to Oakridge," she'd said, tears streaming down her face. Ina and I are just stopping points between flights. That night, alone in our half-empty house, I'd called Charles, voice breaking as I confessed my failures. "Come to the lake house this weekend," he'd said. "Bring them both." That weekend changed everything. Charles showed me how to build balance, how to serve clients without sacrificing family. "The company will always demand more," he'd said, watching Emma and his grandkids skip stones across the water. "Your job is to know when enough is enough." I'd rebuilt my marriage carefully after that, date night sacred on my calendar, Emma's events blocked off months in advance. The miracle was that my numbers improved. Clients respected boundaries. Relationships deepened. By year 12, I'd built a system that worked Oakridge's most profitable division with a normal human life attached. When Charles announced his retirement, he pulled me aside at his farewell party. "I couldn't have done better myself," he'd said, eyes misting slightly. "You've built something special here." I hadn't seen the warning signs when Horizon Labs acquired us. The endless efficiency meetings. The MBA consultants measuring our steps. The whispers about legacy overhead. I was too busy introducing Mackenzie to my clients, opening my contact list, sharing 15 years of relationship capital with someone I believed was there to help us grow. The betrayal was coming. But that morning, as I straightened my tie and kissed Sarah goodbye, I still believed in loyalty. Still believed in Oakridge. Still believed in the company where I'd left pieces of my soul in every major city across America, one handshake and one promise at a time. I was nursing my 2nd cup of coffee when my calendar alert chimed quarterly review with Mackenzie. Something in my gut tightened. These meetings had changed since Charles retired. Gone were the discussions about client relationships and long-term strategy. Now it was all KPIs and efficiency metrics. I grabbed my portfolio and headed to conference room C, nodding at familiar faces along the way. 15 years at Oakridge had made this place feel like a second home. The hallway still smelled of sawdust and ambition. Mackenzie was already there, her slim MacBook open, spreadsheets reflecting in her glasses. No smile, just a curt nod as I took my seat. "Ryan, I'll cut to the chase," she said, sliding a folder across the polished oak table, the same table I'd helped Charles select years ago. "We're restructuring the senior sales positions." My coffee turned to acid in my stomach. "Restructuring how, exactly?" "The board feels your compensation package is outdated." Her words were precise, clinical. "We're cutting base salary by 40% and implementing a new commission structure." The room seemed to tilt sideways. 40%, Mackenzie. I brought in $3.02 million last quarter alone. Yes, but our analysis shows your client acquisition costs are significantly higher than industry standard. All those dinners, golf outings. Those costs built relationships that have kept this company profitable for 15 years, I said, feeling heat rise in my neck. Brandon Holloway signed his 4th warehouse expansion because I spent a weekend helping his kid build a treehouse. She tapped her screen. Precisely my point. Excessive relationship maintenance. The Horizon model prioritizes efficiency. I flipped through the papers she'd given me. My life's work reduced to bullet points and red line compensation figures. This isn't a restructure, it's constructive dismissal. That's dramatic, Ryan. Her tone was flat, dismissive. We value your institutional knowledge. We just need to modernize our approach. I closed the folder. Have you spoken to any of my clients about this modern approach? A flicker of something annoyance? Concern? Crossed her face. Client relationships belong to Oakridge, not to individual salespeople. Those words hung in the air between us. In 15 years, I'd never thought of my clients as belonging to anyone. They were partnerships. Trust. My phone buzzed. Brandon Holloway's name lit up the screen. Excuse me, I said, stepping into the hallway. Ryan. Brandon's voice was tight with frustration. What the hell is going on over there? I just got off the phone with someone named Tiffany from your office telling me you're no longer handling our account and they're raising our rates by 18%. My blood went cold. They'd already started. Brandon, this is the first I'm hearing of this. Let me call you back. I returned to the conference room, my hands steady despite the rage building inside me. You've already reassigned my accounts before even speaking to me. Mackenzie didn't even look up. The transition plan has been in development for weeks. There's nothing personal. Nothing personal? I laughed, the sound hollow against the glass walls. I built half those relationships before you finished business school. That's exactly the problem, Ryan. She finally met my eyes. The old ways are inefficient. Horizon needs predictable, scalable systems, not relationship-dependent sales. As she spoke, my phone kept lighting up. Jackson Reed. Melissa Tompkins. Frank Miller. All clients I'd known for years, all calling about the same thing, price hikes and new account managers they'd never met. You're not just cutting me out, I realized aloud. You're planning to squeeze my clients once I'm gone. We're optimizing revenue streams based on market analysis, she corrected, her corporate speak so transparent it was almost comical. Your clients have been undermonetized for years. I stared, buttoning my jacket. Those undermonetized relationships kept this company afloat during 2 recessions. They stayed loyal when our competitors undercut us because they trusted me, trusted Oakridge. That's the past, she said, closing her laptop. We prepared a separation package if you decide the new structure isn't for you. As I walked out, my phone rang again. Dylan Thompson, our CFO and one of the few pre-Horizon executives still around. Meet me at Cooper's in 20, he said in a low voice. Bring your client list. An hour later, sitting in a back booth at Cooper's Tavern, Dylan slid a folder across the table. Inside were internal valuation documents. The same client book I'd been managing had been valued at nearly double what my compensation reflected. They've been planning this for months, Dylan said, his voice barely above a whisper. That MBA algorithm of Mackenzie says they can increase margins by 22% across your accounts once they transition you out. The betrayal crystallized like ice in my veins. 15 years of loyalty. Countless nights in airport hotels. Emma's birthdays missed for emergency client meetings. All for a company that saw me as nothing but an expense to be cut. I thought of Charles' words at his lake house years ago, your job is to know when enough is enough. As I drove home that evening, my phone kept lighting up with calls from clients, not Oakridge's clients, my clients. People whose handshakes meant something. People who remembered how you made them feel. By morning, I knew exactly what I had to do. Not out of vengeance, but out of respect for 15 years of trust that couldn't be found on any spreadsheet. I wouldn't have to poach a single client. I just had to be exactly who I'd always been, the person who put relationships before transactions. And in that, Mackenzie had made a calculation that all her Harvard algorithms couldn't compute. She'd reduced me to a number, never understanding that in this business, trust was the only currency that truly mattered. I didn't sleep that night. My mind kept replaying 15 years of loyalty, flashing between memories of closed deals and Mackenzie's cold stare. By dawn, I'd made my decision. I wasn't going down without a fight. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in a gleaming lobby of Pinnacle Supply Group, my resume feeling oddly inadequate in my hands. James Kyle, the CEO, had called me personally after hearing through the grapevine about my situation at Oakridge. Ryan Sullivan, he said, gripping my hand with genuine warmth. Your reputation precedes you. 2 hours later, I walked out as the new SVP of Business Development with a compensation package that made Mackenzie's restructuring look like the insult it was. I honored my non-compete to the letter. I didn't call a single client. I didn't have to. They called me. It started with Brandon Holloway. Ryan, at new account manager, they assigned me wouldn't know a full joist from a ceiling beam, and they raised our rates 18%. 18. I kept my response measured. I'm sorry to hear that, Brandon. I can't discuss Oakridge business anymore, but if you ever need anything else. Like construction supplies that aren't technically millwork, he finished, a sly note in his voice. Within 2 months, 7 of my former clients have followed similar paths. Not because I poached them, because Mackenzie's algorithm-driven approach was driving them away. I was reviewing quarterly projections when my assistant buzzed me. Frank Miller from Westbrook Commercial on line 1. My heart skipped. Westbrook was Oakridge's crown jewel, a $4.02 million annual account I'd built from nothing. Frank, I answered, keeping my tone neutral. How's the Seattle project coming along? It's a disaster, Ryan, just like everything else since you left. His voice was tight with frustration. They've raised our rates twice in 3 months. The new guy doesn't return calls for days. I've had enough. We're putting our contract out to bid. That afternoon, my phone rang again. Mackenzie Porter. I let it go to voicemail twice before finally answering. Coffee, tomorrow, the Capitol Grill at noon, she said without preamble. The restaurant was nearly empty when I arrived. Mackenzie sat rigidly at a corner table, her face drawn and tense. You look well, Ryan, she said, not meaning it. I am well, I replied, meaning everywhere. She pushed her salad around her plate. I'll be direct. We're hearing rumors that Westbrook is considering other vendors. I sipped my water. The market is competitive. Cut the bullshit, she snapped, her corporate veneer cracking. We both know what's happening. You're systematically targeting our client base. I set my glass down slowly, memories of that last meeting in conference room sea burning through me. I haven't violated my non-compete, not once. Technically, perhaps. Her eyes narrowed. But we both know you're behind this exodus. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. Did you ever consider that maybe, just maybe, those clients stayed with Oakridge all those years because of the relationships I built, relationships you called excessive and inefficient? We can make this easy or hard, Ryan, she threatened, sliding a folder across the table. Our legal team has prepared. I've respected every letter of the agreement your team drafted. I cut her off, pushing the folder back untouched. I sell construction supplies, not millwork. I haven't approached a single client. They've all come to me. Because you poisoned the well before leaving. I laughed, actually laughed. The well was perfectly clean when I left. You poisoned it yourself with price hikes and automated response systems. You replaced handshakes with algorithms. Mackenzie, that was your choice. Her phone buzzed. The color drained from her face as she read the message. Westbrook just officially terminated their contract, she whispered more to herself than to me. In that moment, I felt no triumph, no vindication, just a profound sadness for what Oakridge had become. You know what Charles told me once? I said quietly. He said our business isn't about wood or nails or profit margins, it's about trust, and trust isn't something you can put in a spreadsheet. I stood to leave, dropping enough cash to cover both our meals. When you discarded me, you didn't just lose an employee, Mackenzie, you lost the only person who understood what made those clients stay for 15 years. I buttoned my jacket. And that understanding wasn't outdated, it was priceless. As I walked out into the sunlight, my phone lit up with a text from Brandon. Just heard about Westbrook. We're not the only ones who remember loyalty when we see it. The weight I'd carried since the day in conference rooms he finally lifted from my shoulders. I hadn't sought revenge. I'd simply stayed true to the values that had defined my career and in doing so, revealed the true cost of Mackenzie's betrayal. 6 months into my new role at Pinnacle, I was reviewing our latest acquisition proposals when my phone buzzed with a text from Dylan, Oakridge's CFO. Turn on CNBC, nah. I flipped on the office TV just in time to see Thomas Bennett, Oakridge's new CEO, sweating through a brutal earnings call. Their stock was plummeting in real time as he fumbled to explain what analysts were calling catastrophic client attrition. We're implementing aggressive retention strategies, Bennett stammered while the ticker showed Oakridge shares down 27% for the day. My stomach tightened. I'd expected some fallout, but nothing like this. Oakridge was in free fall. Later that afternoon, my assistant forwarded me an industry newsletter with a headline, Oakridge Millworks loses 32% market share following executive exodus. The article detailed how my departure had triggered a cascading loyalty crisis throughout their client base. I was reading it for the third time when my office door swung open. Charles Westfield, the original founder who'd sold to Horizon Labs and supposedly retired to his lake house in Vermont, stood there looking older but just as formidable as the day he'd hired me. Got a minute, Ryan? He asked, closing the door behind him. My heart raced. Charles, this is unexpected. He settled into the chair across from me, eyes focused on something behind my shoulder. Quite the bloodbath over at Oakridge. I've heard, I replied carefully. Heard? He laughed without humor. You orchestrated it. I started to protest, but he waved me off. That's not an accusation, son. It's a compliment. His weathered hand pushed a folder across my desk. I've been watching from the sidelines, waiting. Inside was a detailed acquisition proposal. Pinnacle Supply Group would purchase Oakridge Millworks at fire sale price. You're still on their board? I asked, pieces suddenly clicking into place. Charles nodded. Never fully divested. Kept 18% ownership in a board seat. His eyes locked with mine. When Mackenzie presented her modernization plan, I voted against it but was outvoted. I knew what would happen if they pushed you out. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. You knew, and you let them do it anyway? Sometimes the only way to save something is to let it break first. He leaned forward. I didn't sell my life's work to watch Harvard MBAs dismantle it with spreadsheets. I needed someone who understood the soul of the business to rebuild it properly. My mind reeled. So this was a long game, he finished. Horizon would never sell to me directly, but they'll sell to Pinnacle with you at the helm of the acquisition. He tapped the folder. The board votes next week. They'll take any lifeline at this point. I felt manipulated, yet oddly vindicated. Why didn't you warn me? Would you have played your part so perfectly if you'd known? Charles asked, standing. Your genuine response to betrayal was more powerful than anything I could have scripted. You didn't just take clients. Ryan proved what I built was about people, not products. As he reached the door, he turned back. Mackenzie's been terminated, by the way. When you take over, the executive suite will need fresh paint. His eyes twinkled. I hear conference room C might make a nice office for the new CEO. I sat alone for hours after he left, staring at the acquisition papers, realizing I hadn't just been fighting for my career, I'd been an unwitting pawn in Charles's master plan to reclaim his legacy. The revenge I thought was mine had been his all along. The acquisition papers sat on my desk like a ticking bomb for 3 days before I finally signed them. 6 weeks later, I stood in the lobby of Oakridge Millworks, my old home, now mine again in a different way. The receptionist's eyes widened. Mr. Sullivan, they're waiting for you in the boardroom. Walking those familiar halls felt like stepping through time. Employees whispered as I passed, some nodding respectfully, others averting their gaze. I'd become something of a legend, the man who brought Oakridge to its knees without firing a shot. The boardroom fell silent as I entered. Thomas Bennett, still sweating, even in December, shuffled papers nervously. The Horizon Labs representatives looked defeated, their Harvard pedigrees no match for the market forces I'd unleashed. Let's make this quick, I said, taking the seat at the head of the table, Mackenzie's old seat. 2 hours later, the deal was done. Pinnacle had acquired Oakridge at 31 cents on the dollar. I was installed as CEO with full operational control. My first act: rehiring Dylan and 3 other executives who had been restructured during Mackenzie's reign. My second was calling the clients who'd remained loyal to Oakridge despite everything. You stuck with them through the storm, I told Jackson Reed, whose voice cracked with emotion on the other end. I won't forget that. That night, I drove to Charles's lake house, snow crunching beneath my tires. We sat by his fireplace, 2 chess players finally acknowledging the game we played. You used me, I said eventually, swirling 18-year-old scotch in my glass. Charles nodded, unrepentant. I did, and you won because of it. Did I? I stared into the flames. Sometimes I wonder if any of us really won. Look at me, Ryan. His eyes were clear, piercing. Mackenzie wanted to strip mine what I built. You understood it, Sol. That's why I chose you. 3 months into the merger, I stood in conference room C, now my office, just as Charles had predicted. The walls were freshly painted the same deep blue that had been there when I started 15 years ago. I just hung a frame on the wall, my original offer letter from Charles, dated June 12, 2008. Below it sat a photo of my sales team from 10 years ago, all smiles at our record-breaking quarter celebration. My phone buzzed. A text from Gabriella, the Northridge teen, loved the proposal. We're back in. I smiled, remembering how she'd once been Mackenzie's protege. Now she was my SVP of Client Relations, rebuilding bridges I thought had burned forever. A knock at my door revealed Dylan, grinning like a kid on Christmas. You're not going to believe this, he said, holding up his tablet. Mackenzie just got passed over for partner at her consulting firm, where it is, having architect of the Oakridge collapse on your resume isn't exactly a selling point. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt strangely hollow. Where is she now? Some boutique firm in Chicago, taking half the salary from what I hear. Later that evening, as everyone filed out, I found myself alone in the building, just like in the old days where I'd work late closing deals. I walked to the window overlooking the production floor, watching the massive machinery sitting silent until morning. My phone rang. A no number. Brian Sullivan, I answered. Brian. Mackenzie's voice was softer than I remembered. I heard about the acquisition. I said nothing, letting the silence stretch between us. I made a mistake, she finally said. With you, with everything. I thought about hanging up about delivering some cutting line that would haunt her, but something in her voice, the roar of humanity I'd never heard before, stopped me. "What did you learn?" I asked instead. She laughed bitterly. "That MBA programs don't teach you how businesses actually run. That relationships matter more than algorithms. That pushing out the person who built something is the fastest way to destroy it." I leaned against the window, watching my reflection. I learned something too. What's that? Revenge feels nothing like I thought it would. After we hung up, I sat at my desk, the same desk Charles had occupied for 30 years before selling, and opened the bottom drawer. Inside was a handwritten note he'd left me. It was never about the wood, Ryan, it was about the hands that worked it. I realized then that my victory wasn't in destroying what Mackenzie built or even reclaiming what I'd lost. It was in preserving something valuable that nearly slipped away, not just a company, but a legacy of people who cared about crafting something that would outlast them. The next morning, I called an all-hands meeting. Standing before the assembled Oakridge family old faces, and knew I finally felt the weight lift from my shoulders. "We're not just rebuilding," I told them. "We're reclaiming what made us special in the first place." And for the first time since Charles had appeared in my office that day, I felt not like a pawn or an avenger, but like a builder again. I sat alone in my office that night, watching the city lights flicker like distant stars. The true value of 15 years of trust isn't found in spreadsheets or Harvard case studies. It walks out the door when you discard the people who built your success. Mackenzie had been so focused on algorithms and efficiency that she couldn't see the human foundation holding everything together. In trying to cut costs by pushing me out, she'd inadvertently given me the greatest gift, the chance to prove to myself and everyone watching that in business, as in life, how you treat people always determines how far you'll go. I ran my fingers across Charles's note again. It was never about the wood, Ryan, it was about the hands that worked it. A lump formed in my throat as I realized the truth. My revenge hadn't been about destroying Mackenzie or even reclaiming what was mine. It had been about protecting something precious that nearly slipped away, a legacy built on relationships, not just revenue. "We build things to outlast us," I whispered to the empty room. "Even when they try to tear it all down."